Insight series number 59. I hope you are enjoying your weekend and Sunday. Today's topic is really interesting. I'm sure you would have gone through what we call Google search and Google Assistant and search a lot of topics, as well as use the Google Assistant for a lot of things. If I talk about what we want to cover today, it's basically what we call NLP, and it looks very simple what NLP is. But just to talk about NLP and the applications, most of the businesses which are dealing with large amounts of data, unstructured data, whether it's emails, whether it's social media, conversations, online chats, survey responses, and many forms of data. We've seen NLP coming into the workplace and giving the ability to companies to analyze data, to look into the chaos in the data, to look into and gain some valuable insights which come up out of it. And if I talk about the applications of NLP, uh, huge applications in terms of whether we talk about sentimental analysis, whether we talk about text classification, chatbots, text extraction, machine translation, uh, text summarization. I mean, there are different words and applications where NLP comes into picture. So we thought that this is something which is a really interesting topic to cover. And the other thing which I quickly wanted to talk about NLP is that how do we achieve that human level AI performance in terms of looking into the overall 360-degree construct of NLP, whether it's around machine learning enabled by AI, which specifically comprehends, even writes text, which has been one of the most exciting areas in terms of looking further, researching, optimizing, and has made many advancements into this area. There has been accelerated adoption in the field of NLP, and who better than an expert from Google to talk about it? So we have Drishan Arora. Drishan will be sharing his viewpoints on NLP, on the recent advancements of NLP, how it had made it possible to achieve what we call human level performance. And also, he will be sharing his perspectives on achieving early results, limited using limited label data, or this is more of going into the detail there. Just to talk about Drishan, a brief introduction about Drishan, Drishan Arora. He is an NLP expert, works in Google. He's worked on several AI and machine learning areas in the field of NLP, natural language processing, and he's currently a, technical lead there in terms of looking into what we call the Google search and the Google Assistant. Drishan is also a visiting faculty at some large universities and teaches artificial intelligence at scale, focusing on driving AI and NLP adoption in India. From a background perspective, Drishan holds a MS in computer science from Columbia University, specialized in machine learning and NLP, and he is a BTech in electrical engineering from IIT Delhi. Drishan, welcome. We are really looking forward to your session today. I'm sure the audience is, I'm pretty excited about the topic and the things which you wanted to cover. I'm sure the audience is equally excited to hear you. So over to you, Drishan. Handing over the mic to you and look forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kapil, for this excellent introduction. Let me actually share my slides. I think that will make things a lot easier. Okay, so I hope everybody can see what I can see. Yep, that looks good to me. Okay. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Glad to see you all here, especially on a Sunday morning. My name is Drishan, and I will be talking about NLP today, which is natural language processing, and how the recent NLP systems have been able to achieve human-level AI performance in different tasks. I will motivate this discussion by some recent NLP advancements and how you can use somewhat less data to achieve the state-of-the-art human-level performance. Note that although this talk is limited to the paradigm of NLP, the general principles would apply to most machine learning problems, and parallels can be drawn to similar tasks across other areas of AI, such as, for example, computer vision. Okay, so Kapil already went over my background. So let me just tell you a bit about my machine learning background. So I've been working in Google since the last 5 years or so, and in particular, I work with a team called Featured Snippets, which I'll talk about a bit more in the next slide. So I've been basically building and experimenting with NLP models for the last 5 years. And this is a very interesting time to be in NLP because, as again, I'll talk a bit more about this later on, but in the last 5 years, we have been able to sort of achieve excellent results in the last, this field has advanced so much in the last 5 years. I don't even think there's like an analogy for it. Okay. So what is featured snippets? Featured snippets at Google is basically the question answering engine. So, if you ask things like, okay, what are Google featured snippets? Or why is the sky blue? Or who won the gold medal for India yesterday? Or something like, what is 3AI? You will probably see like a paragraph on top. And this paragraph is basically an answer to a question. And sometimes you see other features like this, like people also ask, and you sort of get these sort of like blocks which tell you there are other similar questions that people have asked about this topic. So this is where I work. So my job is, and along with my team, is to make sure that when you search for a query which has probably an answer on the web, we have to get that right. Okay. So I will assume that you will have some basic understanding or interest in machine learning or deep learning or natural language processing. If you don't meet these requirements, that's fine too. I mean, I'm sure you'll get something useful out of this talk. I've tried to make the content somewhat generic so that everybody is able to sort of follow. And I've also tried to keep enough value for folks who actually work in this domain and have been working for some time, so that they also get some value from this talk today. Okay, so the plan for today is one, I'll go over some background about NLP. Then I'll talk about large scale models. And then I'll talk a little bit about, this is how things are done in NLP, like the secret sauce, as they say, for natural language processing. I'll talk a bit about the challenges as this field advances, and I'll end the discussion with some closing thoughts. Okay, let's start with some background. So what is NLP? So the idea is that the goal of NLP is to be able to generate and understand natural language in order to perform tasks which are useful. Tasks can be something like, making appointments or buying things, or something like question answering that we talked about, or translation. But keep this in mind that, fully understanding and representing the meaning of language, or even defining it, is a very difficult goal. So this is broadly like NLP. And the way I sort of think about it is anything in artificial intelligence or machine learning that has to do with like text or speech is basically NLP. Things which have to do with like images or videos is computer vision. So we are at this time, in this domain of like language. It can be unstructured, like Kapil mentioned, emails or reviews and stuff. It can also be structured like, SQL queries, for example, or something which is a little more like, you have this table data which has some amount of text inside. That's also perfectly fine. And that also somewhat falls under the domain of NLP. So these are roughly the usual tasks in NLP. And, there's a lot of the things that Google does, or a lot of the other folks do in NLP, are sort of like some combination of these tasks. And I'll give some examples, sort of motivate this later on as well. I like to think of NLP in basically two buckets. The lower one is basically language understanding and analysis, and this is where most of NLP lies. It covers things like question answering, spell checking. Like, for example, if you're searching for a query, it says, "Oh, did you mean something like else?" Named entity recognition. You have a bunch of text, emails, for example. You want to pick out actual entities inside it. What are the names of people? What are the places and stuff? Sentiment analysis. For example, you have Amazon reviews. You want to figure out it's a positive review or a negative review. Content filtering. If you have something which can be classified as somewhat harmful or somewhat fringy, or something which is you don't want to be shown on your website or your app. The second and the harder part, in my opinion, is something which is called language generation. This sort of involves understanding and analysis of language as well, but at the same time, you want to generate natural language. Actually, not just natural language, like generally language. So some key sort of areas where this is used is like translation, uh, dialogue, like, assistance, and different kinds of, Alexa, Google Home, a lot of these other devices which have sort of like a conversational AI sort of format. And the third one is summarization. For example, you read a news article and you summarize it, or you read emails and you summarize it. And that's also sort of getting a lot more traction as these sort of techniques advance further and further. Most of NLP tasks are some version of this. A lot of these new tasks can also be defined, for understanding and analysis. Like, okay, if I have been given this email, is this spam or not spam? This is sort of falls under the domain of language understanding and analysis, somewhat under like, let's say, for example, content filtering. So they have like similar sort of algorithms which are used for this purpose. Okay, so for example, let me just give some examples of how it is used in Google. So one, for Google search is, I guess, like the most complex NLP system in the world. You ask for a complex query like Macintosh controlled infrared remote. There's a lot of moving parts to this. It's not a language as much as it's more like a keyword. And you have this Macintosh can refer to multiple things, but in this case, meaning like Apple Macintosh. Infrared and infrared remote are two separate things. So you have to sort of understand a lot of the nuances of the query. You have to understand intent. You have to understand the documents to be able to answer this query. You have to index, you have to rank. In all of these, you have these sort of language in documents, for example, in the query, and you have to sort of be able to understand and do a lot of things in a very small amount of time to be able to give a good search result. Another example is like the team where I work, which is called question answering. So for example, what is the fastest bird? You get this paragraph, the peregrine falcon is the fastest bird. And you also have this little bold answer on top, which sort of looks at the paragraph and figures out that this little span is actually the correct answer, the peregrine falcon. So, first you have to figure out is the person that the query that the person has asked, is this actually looking for an answer? And can we find a passage which is relevant to this? And is there a passage which is actually the correct answer to this? Again, there's a lot of moving parts to this problem as well. And when you go to dialogue, there's a lot more things happening. You have to understand, query context, because in a dialogue, it's not just like one atomic query per time. There's a conversation which is happening. You want to understand the context from, 5 sentences ago. You have to actually generate tests. You have to form coherent sentences. And you also have to figure out, if you don't understand something, you have to ask for clarification. And you'll hear a lot of Google Home saying, I'm sorry, I don't understand, or could you repeat that? So these are again, different kinds of NLP systems which are using underlying same technologies of language understanding and language generation. And there's a lot more parts to this as well. Like, for example, you get this in Google News, you get this sometimes, this little summary which says Eddie Van Halen has died. The summary comes from understanding a lot of new news articles which say, oh, Eddie Van Halen dies at 65 and stuff. And you sort of summarize them into one little sentence. And then after that, you actually add this to the Eddie Van Halen card as well, that he died on this particular day. So there's a lot of moving systems in place which actually happen at the back end. Okay, now let's dig a little deeper and understand how large-scale models have actually sort of changed this domain of NLP. So I'll give you a sort of motivating example, and I think like this is sort of like where I would like to highlight how traditional viewpoints of machine learning has changed, especially in the last 4 or 5 years. So to give an example, in 2001, Microsoft researchers ran a test to evaluate different kinds of machine learning models. What they found was very interesting that, no matter what kind of model you used, the size of the data set was much more important than the model itself. So basically what they're saying is if you throw a large amount of data at the problem, no matter what model you're using, you're basically going to end up at the same result. So, which was actually very interesting. And this was like, keep this in mind, this is 2001. So this is, somewhat before deep learning. The same sort of question was revisited in 2017, where Google did the same sort of experiment in computer vision, and they realized that we'll throw a large amount of data, but we'll have different kinds of models. But in this case, what they found was something different. The size of the data set matters, yes, but at the same time, the complexity of the models matters as well. So it's not just the case that throwing a large amount of data set at a problem is actually going to give you what you want. You actually need to have a large amount of data, and you also need to have a complex enough model which can actually learn from that. So the key takeaway that I want people to get out of this is you need to have large data sets as well as large machine learning models to be able to arrive at interesting results. Now, this is one little, there's a lot going on in the slide. Let me just give a brief overview. So this is one of those benchmarks for NLP, which is called for question answering. It's called the Stanford Question Answering Dataset called SQUAD. So this little line that you see over here is what a human would perform at this task. Basically, the task is you have a question and you have this, paragraph, and you have to find out the best answer from it. Something like reading comprehension that you do. So you'll see that roughly in 2018, models started beating human performance. And then after 2019, significantly, models beat this very, very much. So what the people at Stanford did was they changed the task. They made it into a much more complex task, which was called SQUAD 2.0. Again, you have a reading comprehension style problem, but in this case, sometimes the answer is not in the paragraphs, and you have to say, oh, there is no answer. And there's a lot of other things that they did to make it harder and harder. And then you will see that in 2019, once again, machine learning models started beating a human, which is very surprising that, machine learning models are actually trained from human data. I mean, but they have suddenly become smarter than an average human. And this is not just for question answering. Like, there's something called GLUE, which is General Language Understanding Evaluation Benchmark. Once again, roughly in 2019, you'll start seeing a lot of the models actually started beating human performances. And this is sort of like a trend which has happened in NLP for the last, I guess, like 2 or 3 years now, that uh, suddenly models have become so smart that you are able to achieve performance which is better than an actual human for that task, which, kind of blows your mind. And these are like very complex tasks. And this is not something which is like straightforward. This is like, oh, you have this complex information that you have to understand and figure out what can be the correct answer for this or something. And, there are machine learning models which are doing better than humans. Let me give you a brief overview of the NLU landscape. So this is like natural language understanding, and we started with neural networks, and then we came up with RNNs and LSTM. Then there's no need to worry about all the details here, but for folks who are actually aware of these things, this is like how the research sort of played out over the years. The first important model was like the seek to seek, sequence to sequence model, which was in 2014. And then came LSTMs with attention, then transformers, then came in 2018 GPT, which started giving performance better than humans in some tasks. And in 2018 November came the BERT model. And the BERT model was sort of like a groundbreaking thing because it gave a performance which was better than humans in many, many different benchmarks. For example, GLUE benchmark or SWAG benchmark or um, SQUAD benchmarks. So this was sort of like a breakthrough that suddenly we have these models which are, just performing better than humans. So what is happening over there? So one of the things that people realized was that the BERT model, which came out in 2018, was a lot larger than any of the other models. So for example, there were 340 million parameters. Parameter is just something like when you say a machine learning model, you're basically saying, oh, there are these different values that a model learns to give in a matrix, and these are like 340 million. So that's basically the size of matrix that you would be multiplying something with. And BERT became like, it was a large model, and apart from like their training strategy and everything, one of the good thing it was doing was it was a lot larger than anything else at that time. So in that time, I remember like I was actually working on something similar, and we started using BERT for a lot of these things in Google search as well. And it was kind of, it was mind blowing how BERT was just able to suddenly elevate everything so much. And that was in 2018. And now comes 2019. And in 2019, if you look at what the other models are doing, BERT is one of the, how do I say, like the smallest models out there, or at least in this graph. And you'll see that the size of models has expanded quite a bit. And I remember that, in late 2019, T5 came out. And T5 was, again, this awesome model which could do so many different things, and you just tell it to. And again, it was able to beat all these benchmarks once again. One of the other things was that T5 had this one unique capability that it was one of the biggest models out there. It was 11 billion parameters, which is way, way, way bigger than BERT. And that was in 2019. So let's move on to 2020. Now, if you look at 2020, T5 is nowhere near the bigger models now. And then GPT-3 came out, and then DeepSpeed came out, and G-Shard also came out. So T5 is 11 billion parameters and deep speed is 1 trillion parameters, which is almost 10 times larger. So that's actually 100 times larger. So that's actually like, the scale at which this field is growing. And training all these models is also like, it's a lot of time investment. I'll talk a bit about this later on, but for example, GPT-3, was trained at an estimated about $4 or $5 million. So this is, there's a lot of time investment, there's a lot of money investment going here. But what you're getting with this, all of this is something which is truly unique and something which is way, way, way better than before. Okay, so what do these models do, and can we actually use them for different problems if we are not the ones paying, $5 million for training all of these? And the answer is yes. And that's basically what I want to talk about today. So anything in NLP is basically done in a two-step process. And keep in mind, when I say NLP, I'm just using a paradigm. This is similar things are done in like different deep learning platforms. But roughly the idea is twofold. You have this pre-training and fine-tuning. There are like two different parts to this process. I'll talk a bit more about this in like, one by one. So basically like the pre-training consists of two steps. You take a huge amount of language training corpus. This can be, Wikipedia, for example, or book corpus. A book corpus is just like, about 11,000 unpublished books or something. There are different genres like fantasy, adventure, etc. But you use all of this data, and this need not be for a particular task like sentiment analysis or translation or something. You use this data and then you pre-train a large model. And this large model is called, like BERT, for instance, or GPT-3. And they're usually trained with language modeling. Language modeling, to put it simply, is you give one sentence to the model and you remove one word out of it and tell the model to sort of try to predict that word. And in doing so, the model sort of understands the English language. It understands dependencies of words with each other, words with sentences, words with long dependencies of other contexts as well. So that's basically the first part. And then the second part comes in that you sort of take a small amount of data, which is, about 10,000 or 100,000 examples. You decide what is important to you, like precision recall or something, or some benchmark, and then you train the model for that. So I'll talk about this in detail in the next few slides. But basically, what I want you to take away from this is that there are these large models that people train, and you can use any one of them, like BERT or T5 or GPT-3, and then you use it for your particular task. So, and in doing so, you have to follow just steps 3, 4, and 5. You don't have to worry about the large pre-training part altogether. Okay, so keeping this again in mind, you have this large pre-trained model. The same model is able to achieve human level performance on different tasks. And these tasks can be, question answering or glue or, translation, for instance. The idea is you take these models and you use them for the tasks that you care about. For example, in your work, if you have something, email, spam or not spam, you train a BERT model for that. And that should be straightforward to do. So keeping this in mind, the usual sort of key takeaway we had earlier was, we have large data sets and large models which lead to amazing results. But when you think about it now in terms of NLP, the whole domain has become, you just take these large complex models and use some amount of limited data for your task, and you're able to arrive at amazing results. And that's basically the secret sauce of NLP, which people have sort of developed over the last few years. And this is sort of where a lot of the research is going, and this is sort of what everybody in the industry is kind of doing. You take these pre-trained models, which are all open source, and they're like, some great places you can use them from, for example, Hugging Face, for instance. And then you sort of train it for your little task, and you are able to arrive at results which would be as good as a human actually doing that task. So this is the secret sauce of English NLP, at least. So, right, exactly. So what you need to do is, like, in case you want to achieve that for your task, you take this large pre-trained model, figure out your task, figure out the metrics that you care about, and train the model. And this is not limited to NLP. There are other deep learning paradigms which sort of use the same strategy as well. For example, a slight digression I would talk about is computer vision, for instance. And in computer vision, there is a general sort of like deep learning trick that we do. You learn a good representation on a task A, and you use that representation on a task B. So for example, the same sort of like model that I talked about, like for example, BERT or T5, for instance, in images, there's this something called ImageNet, and you train a large model for that. Okay, I'm getting a sort of like chat over here. Is this what is transfer? Yes, exactly. This is basically what transfer learning is. That you take, a large pre-trained model, apply it for a similar task. That's basically it. Transfer learning has a lot of like other, how do I say, transfer learning is a little more generic term. This is like a sort of particular application for transfer learning. Yes, absolutely. And this is exactly what you do with deep learning models. You take this, large task, train a model on that, and figure out the task that you care about, and sort of fine tune your model on that. Okay. So finally, I'll talk a little bit more about, yeah. Okay, I'll talk a little bit more about like the challenges that come with this part. And in particular, like I'll start with Indic languages, or sort of moving beyond English, which I think is kind of like very pertinent to this talk at least. So when I talked about this earlier, I said that there's like a 5-step process for NLP. Like you start with a huge sort of data and you pre-train a large model, and then you sort of fine tune for your particular objectives. Uh, in case of non-English, and particularly in case of Indic languages, and when I say Indic, I mean like Hindi or Marathi or Telugu, but I also mean languages which are a little more tail. For example, Maithili or Konkani or even Assamese for that matter. You don't have a lot of you don't have the kind of data you would need to train a large model. You don't even have that kind of data even for Hindi for many cases. So if you look at an amount of, for example, Wikipedia articles for Hindi, they're very less. And you need at least 100 million plus sentences to be able to train something like this very well, to be able to generalize effectively. So this first part, which is collecting a huge amount of training corpus, is something which is not there for Indic languages. The second part which does not exist is that in research, what people generally do is they have these benchmarks that they set up, and they have these leaderboards. And for example, you have the squad data set, or you have this natural questions data set. What happens usually is that there are these different kinds of people who kind of train these models and put their scores up on the board. And with each significant model progress, you see some sort of like a better score. In case of Indic languages, you don't have this sort of like metrics that you care about. And this is where I think like if these two sort of steps are a little more established, there is no reason why we will not have a similar sort of human level performance for Indic languages as well. And some people are working on this as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later. But this is a key bottleneck for Indic languages. Second is that one other sort of challenge is that when you have large models that are training from large data, uh, you have to keep in mind cases which are not as obvious. And you have to understand that models will try to learn shortcuts as much as possible. For example, word overlap or syntactic patterns or gender bias, for instance. And a sort of like interesting example is that, when BERT model came out, which was supposed to beat human performance altogether for most tasks, people sort of like tried this out, like, sort of blank out one word and figure out what is BERT going to predict as the word for that. So Dash Smith is a software engineer. And the answers that BERT gave were David, Andrew, and John. And you can see all of these are male names. Similarly, Dash Smith is a nurse, and you will see Sarah or Mary or Susan. And these are again female names. Or Dash is an engineer, and you will have, he or husband as the sort of tokens that the model predicts. So you have to take care of cases and sort of figure out that these may not be present in most of your data. But when you are actually using these models on a large scale for applications, there are these inherent biases that may creep in. A model is only as good as the data it learns it from. So what happens usually is that there are a lot of like male software engineers in the data that it is learning from, for example, Wikipedia. And there are a lot more female nurses that is in the data, for example, again, Wikipedia. So the model sort of figures out that, you associate a male name with a software engineer and you associate a female name with a nurse. And these are things which are hard to correct. And because, you can't sort of manipulate the data to an extent that you sort of figure out where this is happening and sort of add examples for all cases. These are things you need to care about a little more heuristically sometimes, as well as actually try to figure out whether these biases exist, and if they do, how to correct for it. Okay, so the last thing that I'll talk about is the drawbacks of this sort of scaling approach that is present in NLP. So there's three things that I'll talk about. Like the first is that there is a huge disconnect with production systems. And what I mean by that is that usually the people who are training the models are doing that on TPUs, for instance, or GPUs, for instance. And most people who actually use those models have a CPU, for example, your usual laptop or desktop that you use. So there's a big amount of latency differences that can come up. What I mean by that is when you actually try to, for example, search something on Google, by the time you press enter and by the time you get an output, there's like a 500 millisecond gap. In that 500 milliseconds or so, Google has to actually go through all the information on the web, understand all the documents which exist over there, and sort of figure out, oh, is this, for example, an answer seeking query? And then what is the answer from it? And how do we show this answer? As well as that, oh, if this is a shopping query, this is a news query. And you look at all these things and figure out what is the best thing to actually show you. All of this happens in a very short span of time, and you need sort of like very different hardware for this. There's a lot of energy cost associated with this as well. Think of how many people actually search something on Google or YouTube, or even other things like for example on Facebook, and how much energy actually goes into each query that people are doing, for instance. Similarly, the second thing is costs. I talked a bit about this earlier, that training costs for these large models is very large, and one is the financial cost, the other is the hardware associated with it. For example, GPT-3, which is not even one of the larger models now, was trained on 10,000 GPUs, and the estimated cost was around $4.6 million. This sort of actually adds a lot of accessibility issues as well. So even larger sort of these sort of requirements actually impose great barriers for many researchers and institutions alike. Okay, so that's basically what I wanted to talk about today. Oh, I guess I'm a little early. So I'll leave you with some closing thoughts. So one of the things when I'm talking about these challenges, I want to highlight that there are a lot of all these challenges that I talked about right now, whether it be it for Indic languages or be it the hardware costs associated or the biases that models can learn. All of these are well known and well understood sort of problems in the NLP community. And there's a lot of research going on to each of these problems. And this is something that people want to correct actively. What I want you all to sort of like take from this talk is basically that there has been a substantial sort of shift in how people think about NLP and deep learning in general. These systems are built in a way that you can sort of take something directly and use it for your particular task and actually achieve performance which is similar to what a human being would do. And you don't need to actually train most of it. You actually just need to fine tune some of it. And that can be done, in places like Hugging Face or other sort of open source domains, which is incredibly accessible and actually gives you outputs which were unheard of, let's say a couple of years ago. Okay, so that's basically all I had for today.
Thanks, Trishan. It was really fantastic, to learn many new concepts for me. Although I applied BERT in one of the survey called, Net Promoter and to identify promoters and detractors. So really liked, the new concept as a new best practices. I will definitely leverage this in my some of future correspondence. So really like it. Thanks a
Absolutely,
lot.
absolutely.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, glad to hear that. And I think I'm very happy you actually talked about BERT, because that was, like I said, sort of like a pivotal moment in NLP recently. And I'm happy to see a lot of people actually applying that for their particular sort of use case exactly the way it is intended. Take a pre-trained model, figure out your particular use case, and sort of figure it out there. Yeah.
Actually, the organization challenge was, in some of the cases, the promoting score was really high, like 10 out of 10. But the sentiment of the customer was really, either neutral or negative. So,
So, right.
yeah,
So
Bert
one of
was
the
helping us. Yeah.
So one of the things I've realized in this, like just to sort of add to this, is a lot of the research goes into the modeling aspect or scaling up aspect. From an applied part, where basically I work, I've seen that most of the uh, NLP actually happens, at least from an applied side, in actually figuring out what to optimize over. Like you said, there was sort of like a disconnect between what you're training the model for and what the actual people are using. I think most of my job, if not all of my job, is basically figuring out this is probably what we want the actual model to optimize over. And if we sort of do this sort of matching well, I have seen that these models can yield exceptional results. Sometimes these tasks are easy, it's something sometimes it's easier, like in a well-defined problem like question answering, for example. It's hard in a problem like you said, or it's hard in a problem which is something like, oh, is the model biased or not, where you have to sort of figure out something which is not exactly like a yes or no answer in a way.
Right. So first of all,
Thank you.
thanks a lot, for sharing best practices. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thank you, Abhishek. I can sense the excitement in terms of the questions you are asking, and thank you so much, Drishan, for the wonderful talk. A couple of things which I got, and I'll just come to the questions also. But you mentioned this unreasonable effectiveness of data. That was something which was interesting talk. And then the amount of investment companies actually spend on the various type of model. That was another thing interesting. Look at the scale of thoughts and the scale of NLP you talked about, right from the evolution, the NLP landscape, and you also talked about how the NLP models have evolved over time. And so, as an example, you mentioned T5, which is 11 billion parameters, to deep speed, which is 1 trillion parameters. Again, a fantastic piece of insights for me. The Glue benchmark, I'm not sure all the people who are here, because the group is a mix of students, working professionals, and very senior leaders. Some of them will be aware of the Glue benchmark. Some is something which is a key insight for them also in terms of the Glue benchmark and what does it really entail. You talked about the secret sauce, and what I really liked, which you specifically mentioned, that the overall equation of large data sets plus large ML model is something which we call amazing results, and how it has actually changed from you don't really need the large data sets. You can just focus on the large data models and then use these models specifically to get the same effectiveness in terms of the amazing results which are there. Of course, there are different challenges you talked about, whether it's around moving beyond the English and the Indic languages, the learning biases, and what are the drawbacks which come in, the overall energy cost, which was another interesting piece for me, which came up from there. I'm sure this discussion and insights which you provided were really helpful for the audience. Couple of questions which you can already see in the chat window, and couple of them are there in the other window where we are projecting this. Uh, I think you covered one or two already. I'll just start with the question, which I understand is the next one, which is, can these pre-trained models be used for credit analysis? If that's the first question, let's start with that.
Right. Okay. So I think so credit analysis, again, I don't have a lot of insight into this, but let me sort of understand what might be happening here. So
Sure.
usually what happens is that something like credit analysis is not as direct as, say, oh, we look at a bunch of text and try to arrive at an output. So what usually happens in this case is you have a lot of parameters going in. You have metadata associated with the person as well. Financial income, is this beyond, above or certain limit or something? Have there been defaults before? So there is a bunch of metadata, and then there is also a lot of language related information which comes into play. Usually how I tackle these problems is, you basically have, how do I put it? You have this sort of like traditional ML approach in which you have a bunch of features which are trying to predict an output. And these bunch of features, and this is something like a logistic regression or a usual sort of like random forest model. However, for the language related features, you try to have an input which is dependent on these BERT-like models. So let me explain how that works. So you have this machine learning model which is going to have 5 inputs and it is going to produce an output. The 5 inputs can be is the financial is the person's annual income above or below a certain amount. That can be one feature. Has that person defaulted before? That can be another feature. The third feature can basically be a score from the language related model, which is piped into this. And that sort of gets a lot more weight depending on whether that's an important feature or not. So can these be useful? Absolutely. How do you use them? People have different strategies, but do not expect language models to give you a complete answer for non-language related tasks. It's best to sort of use them in tandem with other machine learning techniques. Wherever there is a language related component in them, try to use these models. They can be incredibly effective.
Great. And as you speak, Dishan, a lot of questions flowing in, and even in the chat window, I have. So let me take the questions which are here. The next one, which talks about medical data. We talked about credit analysis. Let's go to medical data.
Right.
Can you help the audience understand what are the best trained medical data sets which are open right now? Any idea there?
Right. So I guess, like, to be very honest, I don't work in this domain, so I'm not probably the best person to answer this, and I don't want to answer something which is out of context. What I can say is that medical data or medical information usually comes in two forms. One is mainly for vision related tasks where you have, patient information, which is sort of which you remove the person where you remove the person's identity information. The second is for in case of language. I assume there might be, but usually getting medical data sets is very hard. Like, to be very blunt, there's a lot of laws which exist around whether a person can share this or not. I know for a fact that there have been different sort of research efforts which are definitely going on in the medical domain. And one of the key aspects to each of them is actually trying to obtain data sets for that. And that requires a lot of time investment and a lot of investment from a bunch of people who might or might not have aligned interests. So I'm not sure if there are a lot of good open source data sets from, but what I do know is if there are, there would be few in number. So yeah, that's basically the level of insight I have in this.
Thanks. Moving quickly to the next one, how do we get labeled data for use cases, as an
Yeah,
example, sentimental analysis, urgency detection
right.
for a specific domain? And just to
Right.
continue with that, are organizations, do they sell
Who's
it? Are there programmatic ways to generate it? What are the tips and tricks? What are the best ways, methodologies to get that?
Right. So let me sort of preface this by saying that I guess it depends on the context a bit. So let's start the third. Let's start with the third part or the last part. Are there programmatic ways to generate it if only raw data is very limited? I would say I usually do not like this approach. I think that there is a very good use to actually having labeled data which has been rated by a human instead of actually trying to bootstrap by some sort of way. When you try to bootstrap, what usually happens is you sort of are able to get data from one particular distribution, not a lot of them. It usually makes a lot more sense to get it by an actual human. How do you get it? Coming to your first question, most of the time you use things like Amazon Mechanical Turk or something, which is basically actual softwares where you can put that data, get it labeled by humans. Sometimes that can also have a lot of cost. How you combat that is there's a lot of things which are happening in NLP, and one of the trends that NLP has is that earlier people relied more and more on large amounts of data. For example, translation in 2015 required, I don't know, like millions and millions of parallel corpora. More and more, the direction of research has gone from using large amount of data to limited data. And now there is something which I did not really cover in this talk, which is called few shot learning or zero shot learning. In that case, what happens is that in most times, you do not need a lot of labeled data. You can use just 15 examples of your own, label them yourself, or 100 examples of your own, label them yourself, and train a large model for it. The larger the model, the easier it would be to actually arrive at this task. And it's sort of counterintuitive because you will think that, if you have a large model, you will need a lot more examples to train it well. However, what happens with these pre-trained models is the larger the model, the smaller the amount of data you need to fine tune it. So I would suggest, just take 100 examples, take the largest model possible, look for something called few shot learning, and some models are very good with that. And then you can just arrive at it. A lot of the times in this sort of like sentiment analysis, domain specificity isn't as important. there's, if you're looking for positive versus negative sentiment, whether be it for, a review for a restaurant or a review for, I don't know, like a vacuum cleaner, they have the pretty similar sort of words. And the model is usually able to understand, oh, is this a negative sentiment or is this a positive sentiment? Okay. Moving on to the next one.
So next one, specifically your experience with products like Snorkel for data labeling, any better products out there? Any suggestions, recommendations?
Right. Again, I guess one of the curses of being in a big company is that you don't sort of work with these products very much. Google, unfortunately or fortunately, has its own sort of ways of getting labeled data, which I, actively use a lot for my internal tasks. I generally have heard people, using Amazon Mechanical Turk, and that's basically something which is kind of de facto. I have not used Snorkel. I do not know about it. I do expect that if your task is well defined, it really doesn't matter where you're getting it from, because if an actual human is looking at it and trying to answer, it's usually supposed to be like, it depends on how you've designed it. And if you're able to just test it out with, let's say, let's get 5 people in a room, let's see if their responses agree. And if they do, that means that you've defined the task well enough. And I don't assume it should matter how you're getting it, as long as, there's an actual human in the loop somewhere doing it.
A lot of questions coming up on the different tools, technologies for various things. So we talked about the overall experience, your experience with products. There is also a question around data labeling. Any
Yes.
recommendation on automated data labeling, the conversational logs, the conversational AI kind of products,
Again,
which you can
yeah.
share insights on?
Right. I guess like my same insights hold true. Usually,
Okay.
what I would arrive at is like, if there's a human in the loop, that's a very good step. The second step is take a larger model so you need less of it. If you can get something which is a few short learning model, just label, 30, 40 examples yourself, and you're generally good enough for most cases, for at least for tasks which are labeling yes or no sort of options in certain cases. If you're trying to generate, that's slightly harder, but that is also, can be done with few short learning models. Okay.
And it's more of a problem statement which is coming in particular company. A lot of customers aren't well versed with English and end up writing emails, maybe not in a correct grammatical way and other things. Any specific models to understand these? Of course, I know there are tools which help there. Any
So,
insights?
yeah. So this is actually a very good question. I think like, so one thing to keep in mind is that English in India is very different than English in the US for most cases. Like, if you see how people are communicating in India, or what are the sort of and when I say communicating, I mean not in terms of like actual articles, but in terms of like communicating with each other or emails. It's very different than, let's say, a corpus that you would get from a US Wikipedia. I usually end up doing something which has some sort of Indian context in the mix. There are a lot of good models which have English transliterated as well as English data, English India data. One particular thing that comes to my mind is MBERT, which is not MBERT, sorry, MT5, which is multilingual T5, as well as a lot of IndicBERT, which also includes English. So I would advise, trying out those things for your tasks, because they are going to perform a lot better than a model which is English only, trained on most probably US data. So they will have a lot of differences. This is a really good question. I don't have a great answer, but try to go for a bias which has some sort of Indian data in the actual training of the model.
Okay, great. Again, question on the some good tools specifically on to quantify bias, and to know is there is a good area for startups to work on.
Right. So for the second part, is that a good area for startups to work on? Okay, I might get in trouble for saying this, but I am not sure, and I would probably say no. The reason for that is you need to, at least for a startup, you need to have a very clear and concise way from going from the idea to actually revenue. Or there should be like a very clear way. If you have a clear case in mind where you would want to actually examine this, absolutely. And if you are able to sort of show some business value, absolutely. In most cases, probably not. I think this is something which is generally done